Okay. Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Ahmed El-Shimi from Speechace. I'm speaking to you from Seattle right now. We have a great panel today and a really interesting webinar. Our topic is Fluency Reimagined. We are going to talk about Gen Alpha, this generation that's probably still in the single digits in terms of their age right now. But then over the next decades, they're going to be the young adults who will enter into college and into the workplace. And this is an interesting generation because this is the first AI native generation that's going to learn a lot of things in ways that we didn't learn in different ways. And we think that's a good thing. And that's what we are going to be talking about today. We have a great panel with us today. We have Isabela Villas Boas from Cultura Inglesa. We have Adriana Salvanini from CELEP, and we have Alan Quesada from the University of Costa Rica. Isabela, I would love to, if you just introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a few words.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Isabela. I'm the Executive Director of Products and Learning Experiences at Cultura Inglesa, São Paulo. And I'm very excited to be here because, as you know, since I work with products and learning experiences, AI has had a great impact on how we teach and on how people learn. And it's going to be a great opportunity to exchange ideas with such qualified professionals. So thank you for having me.
Great, thank you and welcome, Isabela. And we also have Adriana Salvanini.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much, Ahmed. Hello, Isabel. I'm Adriana Salvanini here from CELEP. I've been a teacher for more than 30 years. I've been a product manager, materials writer, and now I'm the head of education at CELEP. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invite, and let's share the ideas.
Great, welcome, Adriana. And last but not least, Alan Quesada.
Hello, everybody. My name is Alan Quesada. I'm from the University of Costa Rica. I'm the director of the School of Modern Languages. And as you can imagine, so we try to use AI as much as we can, responsibly and ethically. Great. It's a pleasure to be here.
Welcome, Alan. Great. So before we start, just a couple of small notes to the audience. So we are broadcasting this live. We're going to be speaking in English, but there is simultaneous Portuguese translation. There's a comment feed. You're more than welcome for the audience to put questions or comments on that. You can put your questions in English or in Portuguese. We have team members that are monitoring and we'll be sharing with that as we can. We might take some questions from the audience and add them into the webinar as we go through the topics. Great. All right, let's jump right in. So we will start talking about the future by going actually a little bit in the past. So we will start by just looking over the past few years and seeing, what has changed already. So let's start with Isabela. Looking over the past 2 to 3 years, what is something that you see students are able to do today that just wasn't possible only like 3 years ago from now?
Well, I think the most, groundbreaking change in the past 3 years has been the ability that students now have to have a 24/7 tutor. They couldn't have that before unless they were very rich and could hire a private tutor to engage in personal conversations with. So students can now have an AI tutor without feeling embarrassed, without having to expose themselves in front of the classroom. They can work on their pronunciation. They can get immediate feedback, which is something that is virtually impossible for teachers to do in a large classroom. And so it's they have more time for exposure. So there is, I do believe in classrooms and live teaching, whether it's remotely or face-to-face, but this additional.
That's great. Let me switch. So the 24-hour and constant access use that's been available by AI has been a great great thing to have. Dr. Allen, maybe you can tell us what in your view is one of the biggest changes that wasn't possible a few years ago.
Yeah, since we at the University of Costa Rica assess students with standards tests, 3 years ago, or students couldn't receive immediate feedback, individualized feedback on their speaking, on their pronunciation, fluency, listening or reading, and even writing. So it's been possible through AI, and this is changing the landscape of assessment with more accessibility and more scalability in terms of large scale type of assessment.
Great. So one, that's really, really interesting. I see Isabela's also back. So yeah, one is about the access in,
Sorry.
24 hours. That's fine. This is going to happen. We're doing this real and live, and we will, adjust and switch. This is why we have so many things to discuss. So, and one is on the assessment side. What about you, Adriana? Where do you feel the biggest change? Is it in the practice, in the assessment, and something else, in your opinion?
Yes, I agree with Isabel. I agree with Dr. Allen. That's true. And there is another thing that students weren't able to do, like about 3 or 4 years ago, which is to generate content very quickly. Personalized content that they can actually learn from the content they themselves produce very quickly. So maybe 3 years ago, we had access to information, to data, to content everywhere on the internet, but now they can generate their own content much more quickly. And this is good. Of course, we have the drawbacks as well, but this is very good as well. Of course, they can engage in conversation. They have a 24-hour tutor. This is excellent, but there's something else that they can do, which is also very positive, right?
Interesting. And let me ask you, Adriana, I will continue with you and just mix the order. Do you think this change is happening too fast? This with AI, is it faster than institutions and business that we're able to keep up with?
Yes, honestly, I do. I usually say that society seems to be at one pace. Technology is like 3 or 4 paces ahead, and education is lagging behind usually. And this is understandable because it's hard to change curricula, right? We do not change curricula over time. So we learn how to use these innovations by using them. It's in real time. So it's quite a challenge for teachers, for the educational field, but also it opens up lots of opportunities, lots of doors for us to learn, for us to improve in our classrooms, for us to help students actually learn more from their resources. And as Alan said, if you use it responsibly, for example. So yes, I guess that technology is always, some steps ahead.
That's okay. Isabela, would you agree with that? How do you feel? How comfortable are you with the pace of how the change, and do you feel institutions are able to adapt or not?
Well, I think technology will always come first, because first comes technology and then pedagogy. So technology without pedagogy doesn't make any sense. So we can't just jump into something and adopt it without considering ethical aspects, without considering safeguarding aspects. UNESCO on its report on AI in education emphasizes this a lot. You have to, put policies into practice. Think about how you're going to use it ethically, how you're going to train teachers to use it, how you're going to make your community feel comfortable. So yeah, it is true that the technology is always faster than how schools can adopt it. But it's only natural, because we need a little time, but not so much, because we can't be left behind, to turn this technology into sound, safe, ethical technology. Pedagogy, sorry. Okay, so that's my contribution here.
I agree. Yeah, it is. I mean, AI is interesting, is that it is one of the fastest dispersive technologies that ever came. And this is not true just in education. This is everywhere. So I'm often actually have to remind people when we obviously everybody's concerned most with their domain, but then when you see, well, look how that's relative to everything else, it's actually happening everywhere. So there is no need to overly worry and just look at the broader trend. It's not like there is something special happening here. Well, one of the things I hear a lot, and people say, well, with this, now you have the ability, you can go and ask ChatGPT anything, you can go and get any information. People are not going to have any more needs for books. Is that true? Alan, do you think books are becoming obsolete?
Oh, not at all. I don't think so, but the role is changing, the role of books. They provide a good structure, sequencing, the smell of the pages, but what is becoming obsolete is the idea of just books being enough to develop, communicative competence, for example, or knowledge-based. But AI adds something to books that books itself cannot provide. For example, immediate feedback, adaptive kind of based on what you're reading, it adapts to your own personal interests, and that's why the future is not books versus AI, but how to integrate the ecosystem of the platforms, the books, the assessment, the data, and working together, pulling them together is what should be the future.
Okay. Adriana, do you agree? Do you think if 5 years from now, when you guys were planning, of course, do you think books will still have some role and adjust, or how do you think that plays out? Is there
hopefully, yeah, hopefully. If you're talking about the textbook, the book that we use in schools, they have a purpose. They serve a purpose, right? They help structure learning and teaching. They scaffold learning. They scaffold teaching. So it serves a purpose, right? So I don't think it's going to be obsolete. Of course, AI can help. AI is just a tool, just like the book. The book is a tool, right? It's been known for forever, right? So I don't think it's going to become obsolete because of internet. We've gone through so many internet innovations or tech innovations, and the books are there. The books are surviving, right? Because it serves a purpose, right? It can engage learners as well. So, and it scaffolds learning. So this is amazing. I don't think any AI could actually do that in the way a good book, a good textbook can do. And of course, there is a curricula that books follow, right? There is a curriculum that books follow, right? As I say, it's all very well structured in a way that will actually help learning and teaching, boost learning and teaching.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Yeah.
And we're talking about the textbook, right? If you talk about books in general, right, they are powerful for cognitive development. So hopefully they're not going to become obsolete.
And let's not forget that, these AI models and LLMs have learned from reading and processing every word that's ever written, including our books. So they've learned from books, so we know before we take. Isabela,
can I jump in? Yeah. It's so I'm still developing my literacy in AI. But from what I've been reading and listening and studying, listening to and studying recently, I don't think AI is just a tool. I think up to now, technologies were just tools, but AI seems to me, I'm not sure yet, to be more than just a tool. It's something that might completely shift how companies are structured, how people learn, etc. I'm not sure yet if it will, okay? So it might be more than just a tool. I totally agree with Adriana and Alan. The books provide us the spinal cord for learning, the organized structure, how you put the curriculum into practice, etc. But I also believe that books will be created by AI with good prompts and good editors that are so the AI will be like the content writer, and we will have editors doing the editing and making sense of it. This is something that, yes, I do believe. We already use AI a lot in our institution with a lot of guardrails and revising and reprompting to create materials, not books yet, but materials, activities, sometimes book activities, but not the whole book. But I know of examples that I just came back from my TEFL in Brighton, and I heard there that there are already ELT books that have been completely written by AI.
No, I guess nowadays we are using AI to create books. Here at Select, we are doing that, but it's very, as you said, it's a careful process, right? That is the human touch, and actually the human touch is actually very, very big, right? So that everything is according to what is planned. But yes, in that way, you know, for writing books, for material writing, I guess the AI is going to be a very helpful and powerful tool. It's not going to replace, you know, the human, the human touch, but it's going to be very powerful. It is very powerful already. And not only for texts, right? We are also talking about images. We're also talking about audios, right? So it's bigger than only text.
Yeah. And I think we're going to talk later about teachers and educators, and we have a lot of them, and the role. And like I will come back to this point about because creating content with AI, and how do you find the right balance, and how do you keep your own voice and identity or authenticity, but get the benefit of the skill. This is one of the really important skills. But that's great. I'm glad to hear the panel still believe there's a principle called the Lindy principle that basically says that the longer something has lived, the longer it's likely to continue to live. So books have been around for 5,000 years, and you know, my money is on them continuing for another few thousand years. Great. All right, let's move on and talk about fluency. This is the topic of that. Let's just start by defining it, because fluency can be defined very narrowly or very broadly. Let's start with Alan. I'd love to hear from you. Tell us, how do you define fluency in your at your institute?
It's very interesting because as being a school for mother languages, fluency should be understood as multi-dimensional communication performance. It has many dimensions, but the most important one is that it has to have meaning when you communicate. And it's not just, accuracy or that you sound native-like as it used to be, but use appropriate vocabulary, speak intelligibly as well, and respond accordingly to context.
Isabela, how do you define and measure fluency?
Well, I agree with Alan that it's multidimensional. It's not just about speed of speech or sounding like a native speaker, because this is not something that we adhere to, right? And we're moving towards English as a lingua franca. And I particularly like, the model of communicative competence, because fluency has not been defined. In second language acquisition, there isn't a construct called fluency. Usually we use a construct of communicative competence. And what we're adding to this communicative competence now, when we talk about English as a lingua franca, is not just being able to communicate fluidly and without unnecessary pauses and with intelligible pronunciation and intonation, etc. But it's also about being able to interact with people from different cultures, not just with native speakers of English. And so that's how we define it at Cultura Inglesa.
Interesting. Adriana, I'd love to hear your take on that, since it's such a...
Yes, I see. I try with Isabela here. I like to define fluency in terms of communicative competence as well. Yes, it has nothing to do with accuracy. That's why you have fluency and accuracy. And I like to define it in terms of being able to convey your message coherently, cohesively, with a communicative purpose, just like Helen mentioned, within the right register, appropriate for the CFR bands, right? Because you can be fluent even though you are a beginner, right? You're fluent for that specific CFR band, as long as it's coherent, it serves a communicative purpose, it's cohesive. So that's the way I like to define fluency. Right. And yes, it has nothing to do with the speed of your speech, right? Not even, it may have something to do with the flow, how it flows, but it's more than that. I guess it entails this coherence and cohesive trait.
Interesting.
And here, may I add
Go ahead.
Please.
The
challenge for AI to be used, to measure fluency, speaking, is actually to take into account all of those dimensions, and not just words per minute, or if you have chunks you speak. But that's a very that's a challenge that we have with AI, being oversight and being with humans overseeing what's being measured.
Yes, that is a great point. And often this is true with AI, actually with any technology, is that sometimes, and I approach this from a technology point of view, of course, but sometimes we tend to obsess over the things that we can measure because they're quantitative, and because so then we're like you say, words per minute or speaking rates, or like we focus, and then there are some things that are a bit harder to measure, then they end up basically falling into the background. So how do we counter that? So then how do we measure when you've got something as broad as fluency, where you have certain aspects that are very measurable, that are very quantitative, but then you have other aspects that are much broader? What do you do in order to be able to get practice, to get feedback, and to measure where they are when there's just so much disparity between these different features of fluency?
In our case, what we have seen so far with students interacted with avatars and AI avatars is the fact that their anxiety lowers. Somehow they don't feel threatened by a human being, looking at them or judging them, and that's beautiful to see that. And something else is that students, when they see an avatar like the one Speechace has, they seem to be talking to a real person somehow. I mean, they move their hands and they look at the avatar, and it's great to see that kind of interaction. But even though it's a monologue, I believe that they think that they are interacting with an avatar that won't judge him or her.
Interesting. Isabela, how do you think, when you look from your side, how do you measure the different aspects of fluency, and how do you see students kind of like practicing that and responding to that? Do you see more of what Dr. Allen mentioned?
You mean when using chatbots, when using a speaking companion, or in the classroom in general, or when we need to assess them?
Either, whether it's they're doing with an AI speaking chatbot, or whether they're doing activities or speaking in the classroom. When you look at fluency across all three of these different modes.
Okay, so we look at their ability to use the language to achieve their communicative goals without unnecessary hesitation, with intelligible pronunciation, and with a relative level of accuracy appropriate to their level. Not complete accuracy, because accuracy is something that you develop further on. This is something that I highlighted from Scott Thornberry's talk at IATEFL when he talked about reimagining ELT. He talks about the importance of thinking about accuracy as something acquired later on. So sometimes we want students to be accurate too early without respecting the natural order. So in the beginning, perhaps the fluency is more important than accuracy, as Adriana said. So how do we measure, right? We can't measure as human beings fluency the way that a machine can. Right, because we cannot. Our level of attention and perception will not be able to capture exactly unless we record it and keep listening it to over and over again, which is very very labor intensive. We don't have the ability to do what a machine can do, what an agent can do, what your tool does, for example, with like saying whether the student is chunking the words correctly, because this is something that has a great impact on fluency, intelligible pronunciation, etc. But the challenge is calibrating the AI so that it won't be too demanding in terms of native-like expectations of pronunciation, right? And especially intonation. I think intonation is something that is also important. So we do traditionally English language institutes have assessed students' fluency by engaging them in speaking activities, right? In the past, traditional oral tests, but now with technology, we can have them expose what they know through videos, podcasts, projects, and other types of things. But as I said, when you have a very well calibrated and trained agent that can listen to the students and look at all the layers involved in the language in a way that a teacher cannot do, it is definitely
Adriana, where do you see
an advantage, I would say.
Okay. This has segued us greatly into AI feedback versus human feedback from a teacher. How do you see the difference between the two? Do you see them complement? Does one come in addition to the other? Does one come before the other? Do we just have separate kind of concerns, separate frequencies? How do you balance between those two?
As we've said before here, the AI, the chatbot, is becoming very good at providing feedback. Right, becoming really very good at doing that, at providing constructive feedback. However, and I was reading this book here, if I may show you, it's Education in the AI Era, and it lists, the book lists the skills that AI may become better than humans, in 5 years' time. And when it comes to feedback, when it comes to giving feedback, it questions something like that. Is AI better than human beings at providing constructive feedback right now? And the answer is a draw. So that's a draw. Both can do it quite well. Now, in 5 years' time, will AI be better than human beings? And then, according to their research, they say it's a draw again. So the idea is that, as you said, Ahmed, maybe we have to, work together, walk hand in hand. So maybe by cooperating, by using the AI to, cooperate with you and providing feedback. So I guess that we can really achieve a very good and higher level of feedback. And not only in education, right? You can apply that to the corporate world, for example. Right?
Very, very good point. Thank you. Alan, is there something you wanted to add?
Yes, I kind of agree. But, AI is very good at immediate, consistent, scalable, data-rich, kind of feedback. However, human feedback is very contextual and emotional, interpretative, and pedagogical. So those differences are huge. A teacher can motivate, explain, encourage, and adapt the feedback that they give to students in ways that, you know, AI cannot fully replicate. So we're getting there, but I believe that for scalable, large scale kind of assessment, the kind of feedback that are needed, AI surpasses, you know, human. But still, that human touch and feeling is lacking.
Look, hopefully it's not going to replace humans, right? As I said, they can walk hand in hand. They can actually cooperate with, you know, each other to provide even better feedback. But of course, the human touch is something that is, you're not going to replace it.
And when we talk about feedback, I mean, when we talk about assessment in general, right, as an activity, a pedagogical activity, it has to be ongoing. And the person who keeps the thread of this ongoingness, if that is a word even, is the teacher. So the feedback that the AI provides is feedback on a particular task, and it's just a picture. The person who builds the album and gives the feedback to students about their album of production, their portfolio, is the teacher, because the teacher, sound assessment, good assessment today is about collecting evidence of learning, right? Not looking for evidence of not learning, because this is an old way of looking at assessment, but looking at evidence of success, looking at evidence for learning. And the feedback provided by the AI is one more piece of feedback that you combine with others, your own observations of students in the classroom, tasks that they perform, everyday observations, other tools, and then you put this all together, and then you add the human connection in order to provide this feedback from the heart, because students will not receive feedback if it only moves them cognitively. In order for feedback to be truly processed, it has to first reach you emotionally. Then it reaches you cognitively. And it's only the teacher who can provide this emotional connection that opens up the student's mind for feedback. Does that make sense?
I guess that the AI can help people in terms of content, right? If you don't know where to start from, right, I have to give somebody, kind of difficult feedback, so AI can be a good trigger, right? It can kick off, but then again, it's all the human touch that you're going to apply to your feedback that's going to make the whole difference. You're going to touch people's heart in a way.
And when we combine, AI and human oversight with very clear rubrics and validation, so that's powerful. It's not just AI alone, but the combination of human oversight, human in the loop all the time, and that makes it, trustworthy. Working with AI as a very powerful feedback.
I can attest to that the sum of a teacher and AI, the sum is greater than the parts, significantly greater than the parts, not just that. So let's talk about teachers. Let's talk about the humans in the room, because, we've talked a lot about students and all that, but the teacher is very important. Let's talk about skilling. What do you think, and the number one skill a teacher must develop today, or should be working on developing today?
I believe that, teachers do not need to become programmers. I mean, sometimes people think that they have to go into programming in order to use AI, but they do need to understand how AI tools work and what they can do with learning and teaching. And it's a responsible use of AI and an ethical use of AI, when those elements combine together, we may have teachers becoming very good learner designers and data interpreters and motivators, so that that's what I believe teachers should do in order to adapt to this new way of learning and teaching.
I see. Adriana, do you see eye to eye on that? And if so, how do you offer the resources and the support for basically teachers and educators to kind of make that transition?
Yes, it's a little bit choppy, but let me see if I understood the question. I agree with Ellen. We have to develop our AI literacy. I guess this is something that Isabela mentioned earlier, but it's more than that. I guess the teachers have to develop not only their AI literacy, I would say something like AI pedagogical literacy. You know, how to use AI actually to boost learning or even to help them, you know, develop their own teaching, right? So I would call that AI pedagogical literacy, right? So that we don't fall into the trap, as Ellen mentioned, we don't fall into the trap of wanting to become programmers, for example, right? We don't need that. We have to learn how to use it, how to use AI for a pedagogical purpose, maybe. I guess that for me right now, it's the most important thing that we can help teachers develop.
Isabela, do you feel that it's something that you also like helping teachers use AI tools to implement or create pedagogy? That is this something that every teacher should be involved in, or do you feel that there's a certain group? How does that flow work to support teachers just understanding how a certain pedagogy is then implemented, is used, such that some amount of practice or assessment is done through with AI?
Well, I really like the UNESCO paper on AI in education, and I really support what they advise, which is involving teachers in AI governance and decisions about AI in the institution from the beginning, because you need teacher buy-in. And if you start something and then you impose it on the teachers without buy-in, without their understanding the purpose, they will definitely not adapt to the new whatever you want to design, etc. And I know there are some we already have frameworks for AI literacy for teachers, and so it's important that teachers develop their AI literacy. It's important that institutions have their AI policies well established. For example, here at Cultura, we have a policy about how much AI students can use to develop their writing. So for which phases of the writing process they can use AI, and for which phases they cannot use AI. And when they submit their paper, they have to check, like, I hereby declare that I have not used AI to produce this, or I have used AI to brainstorm ideas, or to revise my writing, etc. And of course, will people lie? May people cheat? And yes, they have lied, forever. People have copied work from colleagues and even paid people to write their master's dissertations. We see this here in Brazil everywhere, like, oh, I can write your paper for you, blah, blah, blah. So I'm not afraid of this fear that many teachers have, and they do have, about students using AI to cheat, because students who want to cheat will always cheat. It's easier now. Yes, it is. But I think we need to treat the root cause and not the result. Why do students cheat, right? Because of the way our educational system has been designed, the way we measure them, the way we define success. So we need to blame ourselves for why students cheat. And then when we get that out of the table, because I think that's the teacher's greatest fear when we talk about using AI. I don't know if it's your experience. Right? So they want to go back to traditional practices like, oh, let's do the writing in class and not for homework, because then I can control, I can watch. And this goes nowhere, right? Because we are going to continue reproducing the same practices. But so going back to your question, I think we start with curiosity. I think it all starts with curiosity. We need to encourage teachers to be curious about new advancements in education, in technology, and everything that is contemporary. And from that on, because out of curiosity comes your desire to explore, to learn more about, etc., and to contribute to the institution's development of a solid and well-designed practices of AI.
That's very, very, very interesting. So that's actually great to hear. I'm gonna ask you a follow-up question on that, and then spend some more time with the panel. So you've taken a point of, and that is a progressive view of just saying, no, you can use AI in writing, but here's where you can use it. So you can get a balance of using it to help and not. Like, I know there are others. I can tell you, for example, schools where I live in Seattle just, chose the other extreme of just basically saying, no, you cannot touch, AI, which I think is a little extreme given the world that this generation is going to grow up in. Did you find resistance to reaching that internally when you kind of made that decision? And how did you come up with the formula or the balance of saying, this is where you can use AI, but here's where I want you to add your own voice to kind of implement that? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, first of all, we changed completely the kinds of writing assignments we ask students to do. It's no use asking students to write argumentative things or cause and effect, these traditional things. Something that AI cannot do is to talk about personal experience, things that involve creativity and emotion. It really sucks, pardon my French. I've tried to use AI to create, course names that are different, or book names. It's terrible. It never comes up with good ideas.
Yeah.
So we are redesigning the types of writings that we have our students produce. And then we are also, do we find resistance? Yes, not everybody agrees with this. They think, oh, well, how are they going to do when they have to take their exams? And well, it's like the student who cheats when they'd have to hand in a writing assignment and asks their friend to write it for them or copy. So what we're trying to make teachers aware is to show students about academic integrity and the consequences of that. So if you don't learn now, in the future, you won't have a job. You won't be able to do it when you need to. And we're focusing on writing prompts because AI is as good as the prompts you write. So we're focusing a lot on writing good prompts for AI because after all, that's what students are going to use it for. So why are we going to pretend to simulate a reality in the classroom that is not how people actually write? I mean, I consider myself to be a good writer of English, but when I have to submit something that is high stakes, I'll always ask somebody to revise it for me, or to help me look at words that are repetitive. So that's natural. That's what writers do. So now writers use AI, and so that's what students need to do, because we need to to teach students to use English in real life situations. We're not just teaching them how to pass an exam. Okay, you want to practice writing for an exam, choose some days in your syllabus to do that. It's okay. But we need to teach them how to use AI to improve what they're doing, but without substituting it. So teaching them about cognitive laws, etc. So it's all about re-educating them. I mean, that's what
Alan and Adriana, let me open to either of you.
Can I add something? I guess, yes, I agree. Yes, it's not a question if they're going to use AI. Students are going to use it, and that's it, right? There's no going back, But yes, and then maybe it's the school's responsibility and it's the teacher's responsibility to show them how to use it responsibly. But they're going to use it, so let's use it to bounce ideas, right? To generate ideas, to provide you with feedback on your production. So it's not a question if they will use it. So let's use it well, right?
And this gives me a chance to say that, like here in Costa Rica, for example, at the university, we promote critical thinking through the use of AI.
Yeah.
So students will create tasks in class, and then they use the AI to kind of do the same thing, and then we compare and contrast the quality of the output. And then we can see patterns and things that only a human can actually come up with versus the machine. So this kind of analysis makes students be more careful with not just trusting everything that the AI will come up with, but look at it in a critical way, and of course teach them how to write the best prompts. But the most important thing for me would be, to be very critical about the output of whatever the AI will produce.
Yes,
that's a great point. Please, Adriana, continue.
Yes, I agree. Actually, you have to be very knowledgeable to analyze the content that the AI, provides, right? So if you don't develop that good base of knowledge, you won't be able to pinpoint the inaccuracies, the bias, for example, right? So this is something that we have to teach students as well. Right, the AI is going to give you whatever you want, great, but will you be able to analyze it critically, to pinpoint the inaccuracies, as I said before? So yes.
Because it also looks very professional and it looks very confident. So it's easy to take it wholesale, but then you have to. And this goes back, this actually goes back to teachers, and we talk about great teachers and what they can add. And again, this human element and the intuition and the ability to just look with a critical eye and say, wait, I know there will be some flaws here or some major things missed. Let's not even say a flaw. And I need to be able to looking for it. And then to maintain a voice and identity, because while it's not, it's a huge risk for someone to not have any ability to use AI in the future, but it's also a huge risk to be someone who just takes whatever you get and pass it on, because then, where's your own voice, identity, and value? You haven't added any value to that. That's a great point. So let's transition and talk a little bit now about the future. We have to start making some predictions. This is difficult, but what do you think? What exists today that will be gone in a decade? You think that just will become a thing of the past?
Well, in this case, in Costa Rica, the university, we have this program for language testing, language assessment. And I believe, that large-scale language assessments based only on paper and pencil will probably disappear or become less common.
That makes sense.
But that's something that we can see in the near future.
I totally agree with you, Alan, and that's exactly what I was going to say. The way we have the assessment, like exams, like Cambridge exams, Oxford, etc., TOEFL, they're going to change completely, because nowadays we have discrete items because of the inability, it's very expensive to assess only performance. With AI and with large language models, we will be able to assess only performance. And it's only performance that matters, because people don't fill in the blanks in real life. People don't listen to a text and then decide if sentences are true or false, or they do a reading and then, the types of activities that we have students perform on exams are completely artificial. And they are a way to make it more, to make it viable to assess students and to reach their level of fluency. So when we are able to have them read a text and then associate it with something, and then gauge their understanding of the reading in based on what they can do without reading in real life, and that's what AI will enable us to do, or with the listening, because, speaking and writing, it's easy, right? I'm thinking about the skills that are not performance necessarily. And besides, we only read and listen in order to perform something, right? So I think there will be a complete shift. And maybe we won't even need them, because we will have AIs listening to students in the classroom and assessing them on a daily basis and deciding what their level of English is without their even having to sit an exam. That's how I see the future.
Okay. Pen and paper.
Absolutely.
Adriana?
Absolutely. I go along with that, as I guess that the biggest change maybe it's going to be in assessment, in large scale exams.
Yeah, I agree. So pen and paper, a lot of the fill in the blanks, MCQ. I think a lot of I'm going to add to this, putting in a technology lens, a lot of the activities that were done because they're just easy to do on a computer, because that's how computers work. This whole aspect of HCI, human computer interaction, which really, did a lot of disservice to the H in HCI, the humans, because it basically made the humans have to do things in ways that computer understand. Now, computers and AI can understand us in a more natural. There's going to be likely a major shift in that, the way menus and applications and drop downs and all of that stuff. Adriana, I want to ask you about, you mentioned pedagogical principles several times. I'd love to hear from you. What do you think, which pedagogical principles are timeless and are likely to live with us and become maybe even more essential in this AI, in this new world that is, when you look over the next decade?
Yes, I think there are many, but basically we use language to communicate, right? And communication presumes some kind of interaction. So I think this interaction that you need when you use language or when you read, it's not only spoken language, when you write, when you read, when you listen. So it all presumes some kind of interaction. So maybe I guess that interaction is one of the principles that we cannot erase.
We cannot erase. I agree.
Yeah,
all right.
I do agree with Isabela in terms of, meaningful communication and motivation and the human connection. I believe
Curiosity.
that AI will never replace. And students need comprehensible input and that kind of to produce, or opportunities to produce language, meaning, and that's something that I see very powerful as a pedagogical principle, something that cannot be changed by AI.
Okay. What sounds scary, but actually a good thing? There are a lot of things that are scary about technology that are a bad thing. It's all agree that it's easy. So, but what is scary, and we think it's going to be kind of scares you about the future, but we actually think it's going to lead to a good thing that we should embrace and overcome our fears around. I'll leave it open.
I'll connect it to the last question, because I'd like to add something to what Alan and Adriana said, that they are great. I agree totally with their answer. But something else that I think we cannot replace in education is the struggle. Learning involves struggle, involves some kind of struggle. It involves trying it out, get it wrong, trying again. So AI cannot substitute this necessary struggle involved in learning anything, like riding a bike, speaking a language, doing math. There's always struggle. You never get it right at the time. So we can't replace that, right? And so effort, right? Struggle, effort. So we cannot replace the effort. And learning is a social activity, a cultural social activity. It's inherently human. So what scares me is that we are not our institutions, our governments, our powers that be will not be responsible enough to contain dangerous developments in AI. That's what worries me the most.
That's a great.
Yeah, I do agree with that. AI government, I believe that's the scariest part in terms of transparency, validation, and human oversight. But the kind of ruling or governing of AI in education, especially, is very serious, and something that is scary to me in language testing, for example, is automated speaking assessment. Let me tell you, I used to, and I believe that you guys too, when we assess oral production, I used to have another teacher. The two of us would sit with a rubric and a pencil and start writing while the student was speaking. And now that we can see how advanced AI speaking assessment is, that's scary, but that's promising too. Especially when something that we cannot do, assess oral production at large scale, and that's something that AI can do very good.
TOEFL has been doing it for quite a while, but not with this kind of AI, with machine learning, right? Which is not agentic AI, but they have dropped the humans a long time. I mean, they dropped the humans a long time ago.
Right. It is. It's definitely, and it's like giving the stakes. But it's one of the things I feel like we are gonna make mistakes, and there's gonna be, and we just have to be, willing to kind of embrace those and fault and know that, AI. I think as time goes, AI will probably fail less and have, but when it does, the magnitude might be higher. So we have to be ready for that. And I think the jury, it's beyond the scope of this discussion, whether government regulation or intergovernment regulation or other bodies who can move fast enough, because, I hear you, Alan, but I also hear you, Isabela, that, governments very often, those politicians are not really the best to be able to keep up with this speed. They cannot come up with the regulations. So who can actually find that balance? That is a great topic for another day. All right. We only have a couple of minutes. I want to make sure we just take some time to close. So first of all, thank you so much to the three of you for this wonderful discussion. I want to go around and just see how we found. We're doing this week. I know Isabela and Adriana, you're both in Brazil. We have Bet Brazil next week. Where can people find you? Maybe we can go to each of you if they, because a lot of the audience here would be around. Where can they find you, or where else? If there's another resource online that they can follow you or find you or talk to follow up from this?
Well,
Isabela?
I'm going to be at the Cultura Inglesa booth. I don't know right now what the number is, but we have a booth, and I think it's going to be pretty close from yours, from the Speechace booth. And since you opened up the opportunity, I don't know if all of you are familiar with it, but Cultura Inglesa has a college, Faculdade de Cultura Inglesa, and we are launching a new extension course called AI and AI Cidadania Digital na Educação, starting on May 21st. So look us up, and if you say that you were on this webinar, we'll give you a 50% discount.
Oh, great! Already, great. And Adriana, are you going to be available?
Yes, we are going to be at Bet Brazil as well. We are going to be very next to Speechace, but I don't know the number of the booth. But you're going to be there, come and visit us. It's going to be very interesting to see our new products. We also have an AI course, but that's for students, actually teach our students, mostly our teenagers, how to use the AI, how to generate content, image, audio. So we also have that, so you can come and check what we have to offer.
Great. And Alan, I know you're in Costa Rica, not in Brazil. You have a wonderful TEDx talk. I encourage everyone to go and search for Alan Quesada TEDx. You have a wonderful, that was, I think, from a couple of years ago. But where else can some of our kind of audience read more about your work and find out what
if you Google Alan Quesada, you will see, many places where I can be found and my email. But we're trying to come up with language assessment that is just for learning and not just of learning, but for learning and as learning as well. So we're making a great effort to assess the whole country. Since 2019, we've been evaluating Costa Rica's public educational system, and we have been very good at providing evidence for stakeholders and to make good decisions on making good reforms, educational reforms.
Great. And me, Speechace. So Speechace will be at Bet Brazil as well. We are in booth M112. There's a lot of information on speechace.com. We will put all of this as well in the show notes and the description in the webinar recording that goes out. So anybody who didn't just capture that, you will see it. The emails, just scroll down. We'll make sure it's accessible. Isabela, Adriana, Alan, thank you so much for the time. This has been wonderful. Good luck next week. And thank you to our audience for being here with us. Thank you.